We are continuing in Matthew 24. This is like I mentioned last week, this is the longest chapter where Jesus goes on and talks about the end, how this present evil age is going to wrap up and how the better tomorrow is going to come in. Matthew 23, 24, and 25 really should be read together, but I'm just doing 24. Last week we did verses 1 to 14. 1 to 14 kicks off because Jesus, in a dark mood of frustration, because the people of Jerusalem, the Jewish people, the leadership, they won't come to him as the Messiah. He tells the disciples that this beautiful temple complex that Herod is still building, it's beautiful, it's huge, it's massive, huge plateau, huge retaining walls, beautiful. He tells them that the day is coming when not one stone will be left on top of another. It'll all be razed, it'll all be demolished, all be gone, which is very shocking and horrifying to Jewish people, because you want to be close to God. If you want to know God, you want to have a relationship with God, you need this temple to be there. So how could it all go away? Jesus has said before it's going to go away because we're transitioning to a new and better shape of a relationship through him, not through priests in a building. But it's frightening sort of news. And so they asked him, well, when will this happen? When is everything going to be destroyed? The temple destroyed, Jerusalem destroyed. What will be the sign of your coming? And what's the sign of the end of the age? They asked him that in Matthew 24, verse 3. So throughout the course of Matthew 24, he's going to answer all three questions in his own way. He doesn't answer it by saying, number one, this is the answer. Number two, here's the answer. But he does answer them in his own way. So in verses 4 to 14, and we ended in 14 last time, he basically answered, what will be the sign of, he basically answered, what is the sign of the end of the age? In Matthew 24, 4 to 14. And he basically said there's going to be this escalating on-ramp of turmoil, wars, rumors of wars, false messiahs, people who claim to be the Messiah, they're not, ignore them, persecution, tribulation, hard times. Many Christians will fall away. Other Christians will betray each other. And that's what he says. So it's this picture of like a freeway on-ramp where you're getting closer and closer, you're building up speed, and then you're going to merge, and then bam, you're on the interstate. It's like the first time Samuel drove on the interstate, he drove on it by mistake because we were in downtown Olympia and he took a wrong turn, and I was like, well, I guess you're going on the freeway. He's like, what? So that's how Samuel drove on the freeway. This is what's happening up to verse 14. And verse 14 is the hinge. So this is the way things are going to be. And verse 14, where we left last week, he said, this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in, or probably better, throughout the whole world as a testimony to all the nations, and then the end will come. So they want to know, what's the sign of the end? The trigger seems to be when the gospel has reached all the whole world to some sort of saturation point that's not defined. Whenever that is, then there's going to be a kickoff toward a trigger when the whole series of events that make up the end of the age begin. And that's where we stopped last week. So now, today, all we're going to do is verses 15 to 20, maybe 15 to 28. This gets to be a very hard bit of scripture. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to read 15 to 28. I'm going to tell you three different ways that very good Bible-believing Christians understand what's being said, and then I'll tell you the right way. The way that I believe makes the best sense. Now, next year, maybe I'll change my mind. But for now, this is where I'm at. The last time I looked at this extremely closely was a year ago, and I read my stuff over again, and I still agree with myself. So that's something at least. So I'll read verses 15 to 28. And then the end will come. And now we have verse 15. He says, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, Matthew 24, verse 15 to 28. Let the reader understand, verse 16. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Whoever's on the housetop must not go down to get things out of his house. Sounds pretty bleak. And whoever's in the field must not turn back to get his cloak. So run quickly, get away as fast as you can. But woe to those women who are pregnant and to those who are nursing babies in those days. Moreover, pray that when you flee, it will not be in the winter or on a Sabbath. For then there shall be a great tribulation or persecution, time of trouble, such has not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again. And if those days had not been cut short, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect or the chosen ones, those days will be cut short. Then, if anyone says to you, behold, here is the Christ, or he's over here, do not believe him. For false Christs and false prophets will arise and will provide great signs and wonders so as to mislead, if possible, even the elect. Behold, I have told you in advance. So if they say to you, behold, he's in the wilderness, do not go out. Or, behold, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe them. For just as lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. That is where we will stop. What is he talking about in verses 15 to 28? What event is he talking about, do you guys think?
Tribulation.
So you think the tribulation. Okay. Well, does anyone else have any other ideas?
So the immediate period right before his return.
Okay. So yeah, like
he'll return in a dramatic way, but shortly before that, during the tribulation, I'm sure.
Okay. So it's the same page as Peter. Were you gonna ask Jeff? Yeah.
Well, what is the abomination of desolation that Daniel talked about?
Yeah, that's from Daniel 9:27. Does anyone remember when we did Daniel, where I spent like 5 weeks and people looked really bored the whole time because there was a lot of math and other stuff involved? But in Daniel 9:27, it's at the end of this really intricate prophecy that's 4 verses long. And this is an event. The abomination that causes desolation is this blasphemous sacrilegious thing that's undefined, but it's blasphemous and it's very bad, that the antichrist does when he sets up some sort of blasphemous desecrating image of some sort, probably inside the temple during the tribulation. That's what Daniel 9:27 is talking about.
Isn't he declaring himself to be God at that point too?
Probably, yeah. So we did 2 Thessalonians 2, and that's the best passage about the Antichrist, other than Revelation 13, and we talked about that. So we have a lot of votes for this is the end days right before Jesus comes back. This is the tribulation, the great tribulation period. Does anyone have any other ideas? Yeah.
Are you gonna say anything?
No, go ahead, and then Phil's gonna go. Yeah.
I feel like when we go to make like choices just about anything, like hanging out with people or should I have this drink, this glass of beer or this plastic, just something simple like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it feels like, well, maybe I shouldn't do it because what if I'm just sick and don't want to do it, or what if I'm just like, what if I don't feel good? Like just everyday decisions.
Yeah.
And God can be like, no, don't do it. Like walk away. Something like that.
You're saying that might be what's being talked about here, or it makes you think of that?
To think about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, Phil, what were you going to say?
Isn't at some point, doesn't the Antichrist declare himself God? He stops people worshiping in the temple because they're now supposed to worship him. So that sounds like a pretty good precursor to, he goes into the temple and says, this is my temple, and he does something.
Yeah, that's what Daniel 9:27 says, and that's what Jesus quotes here. So does anyone else have anything they want to toss in here? Everyone's on the same page, which is kind of surprising. But there are other pages that good Christians have, and I'll tell you what they are. Anyone else? Okay. There are 3 ways that really good Christians understand this passage. Way number 1, many people think verses 15 to 28 is just about the Romans destroying the temple and destroying Jerusalem, which is what Jesus said would happen, which is what made them ask him the question, and that he's answering that question. So that's way number 1. Way number two is way number one is it is only about how the Romans will destroy Jerusalem in 70 AD, knock everything to the ground. It was an awful time. Many people died. It was terrible. It was awful. Josephus tells us there was this whole multi-year siege was accompanied with bizarre, miraculous, really disturbing signs in the heavens and unexplainable things happening in Jerusalem that were sinister, frightening. It was a extremely weird and scary time filled with all sorts of supernatural signs and wonders that were not always very comforting. So that's way number one. Way number two is what you guys were mentioning. This is only about the last days. That's all it's about, the last days. It has nothing to do with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem by the Romans in 70 AD. Our circles usually tends toward that. The third way is that it's talking about both of those at once. It's having two conversations at once. It's talking mostly about the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, but all of that is also in a deeper and scarier way referring to what the Antichrist is going to do in the last days. I think it is the third one, mostly because of what Luke says. Matthew, Mark, and Luke have this same event. The way Luke describes it, he describes it as though the Romans are going to destroy the city. So I think it is about the Romans destroying the city, but also in a deeper way, it's also really, really strongly hinting at what the Antichrist is going to do, desecrating the temple, causing chaos and destruction and awful times in the last days.
Well, doesn't the Antichrist actually build the temple to kind of make a false peace with the Jews?
There's nothing that says the Antichrist builds a temple. There appears to be eight. So like in Daniel and in Revelation 11, Revelation 13, there appears to be a temple there at some point in the future for the Antichrist to desecrate. But I don't see anything about him building one. I see him like taking over what has been built and basically desecrating it for his own purposes. That's what
I may have slipped the gear, but I thought the temple had to be rebuilt in the last, at some point during the last seven.
Not necessarily. There appears to be the need for a temple to be there during the last seven. But when exactly it's going to be built, I don't know. It seems that by the time the last seven from the prophecy from Daniel 9 hits, there will be another temple there. Obviously, there's a whole lot of things that need to happen before that happens. But that seems to be the deal. So let me tell you why I think it's talking about both of them at once. When you look at this phrase in verse 15, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet, then get out, run away, get as far away as possible. Daniel says that is the Antichrist that does that. But Luke says something slightly different. So when Luke writes his account, he says something that's a bit different. So if you look at Luke 21, verses 20 to 24, Luke picks up exactly where we left off in Matthew, because they're talking about the same account, but they have slightly different, they have complementary, spins on this account that the Holy Spirit made them write. And in Luke 21, 20 to 24, this is what he says. He says, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then recognize that her desolation is near. Then those who are in Judea must flee to the mountains. Those who are inside the city must leave. Those who are in the country must not enter the city. Woe to women who are pregnant. The same thing. But instead of saying there's going to be this abomination of desolation that Daniel spoke about, Luke seems to be focusing just on how the Romans will destroy the temple in 70 AD. He says, like I said, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then her desolation is near. The only time where Jerusalem is destroyed is by the Romans. The Antichrist does not destroy Jerusalem, nor does Satan after he's released after the 1,000 years are over. They march on Jerusalem, but they never actually destroy it whatsoever. Luke shows Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, and her desolation or destruction, because that's what it means, is near. Luke seems to view this instrument of the desolation as the Roman army, because it's the only thing that fits where Jerusalem is surrounded and then the desolation or destruction follows right away. That's the only thing that fits, because the Antichrist never does that in Revelation 19. Satan never does that in Revelation 20. So I think if either Matthew, Mark, and Luke are on completely different pages, or Luke is on drugs or something, or they need to be put together in a coherent way because the Holy Spirit moved each of them to write this. So, because of what Luke says, I think that when you read Matthew, what you're seeing is you're seeing two things at once. You're seeing you're seeing Jerusalem and the temple being destroyed, but you're also getting really strong hints that are also applicable to what the Antichrist is going to do in the last days, if that makes sense. You see, whenever this event happens, according to Luke, when the Roman, if you want to read about what the Romans did, you should just go to Wikipedia and type in First Jewish War. The Wikipedia article is really good. It's not inaccurate. It's good. It's short. It's free. You can find it on your phone. First Jewish War. The Jewish people torn themselves into bits and pieces with different factions in the generation after Jesus died. A whole bunch of Jewish people massacred the Roman garrison in Jerusalem. The Romans dispatched an army to destroy these upstarts because they're very angry. Civil war lasted for about 4 years with ebbs and flow. The Jewish people were not crushed immediately. Eventually, they're pushed back into Jerusalem, and this siege that lasts a few years happens. And if you've watched movies where there's siege warfare or you've read about sieges, you cut the city off and starve it. That's what you do. And so they have no food, they have no water. They're usually fine for a little while, but then they run out of food and water. They cut the water supplies, and there's ways to try and get food in. But then as they surround the city more and more, the occupying army cuts off everything more and more. And eventually you just starve the city out, which is what happened to Jerusalem. Things began to go crazy. The Romans steadily advanced into the city, block by block, step by step, until they got into the city, then through the city, then to the temple compound, then into the temple over years. And all the while, there's different Jewish factions fighting against each other. There's mass death, starvation, cannibalism. I read you a few weeks ago an account from Josephus where a woman named Mary took her infant son, killed him, roasted him, ate half of him, then stored the rest away for later. Josephus is he was there. He's explaining what he saw. Awful, awful time. So this was not a picnic. This was a very awful time. So that's why Jesus says, when you see this start to happen, when you see the Romans marching on Jerusalem and you see the noose tightening, get out immediately. Like, leave quickly. Don't go down to get your stuff. Don't pack. Don't do anything. Just leave. That's why he says in verse 18, if you're in the field, don't go home and pack your suitcase. Just leave. If you're pregnant, that really sucks to be you. Yes, Brandy.
Again, just being basic and simple. You know how he's saying just run away and leave, like the end of time is here.
Yeah.
But it's also like, back to the 10 Commandments, we're not supposed to worship anything over him, right? So if the end of time is here and you're holding on to all your things that mean the most to you, like, it's kind of like, well, doesn't God mean that much to you? Like, why can't you just drop it and let him come in and get you and take you home with him? Like, why is everyone grabbing for like their purse and their phone? And
I see what you're
you
saying.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Bible passages that talk about, what is actually important to you in life. Yeah. Here, he's saying, don't go back because you'll probably just die. Like, you need to, this is how fast you need to run away. So that's why he says it's very unfortunate for you if you're pregnant. It's very unfortunate for you if you're a nursing mother. It'll be really terrible if you have to flee if it's in the winter because it's harder to get around, or if it's on the Sabbath because there will be all sorts of restrictions and other things going on, which indicates the temple's probably still around, so it's probably before 70 AD. And then he says, again, I think the best way to understand this is he's speaking about both things at once because of what Luke said. He's talking about, have you ever had a conversation with someone where there's two things going on at once, where something's being said on the surface, but underneath there's very clearly something else that's being communicated? I think everyone's had those conversations in one form or another. I really believe that's what Jesus is doing here, because that's the only way to put Matthew and Luke together. So you see in verse 21, he's really shading over to the end times at this point. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever will again. And he says it's so bad that every single person would have died if I don't stop the destruction from being totally complete. I gave you a little example of how awful things were in when the Romans destroyed the city. I mean, there's horrific accounts of people committing suicide by leaping off the top of the temple compound into the valley below rather than being taken capture by the Romans. Total craziness going on. There's false prophets wandering around telling people God will intervene for us, Josephus tells us, and they're just lying they're just lying to do this to get people to fight even more. And it was just a complete disaster for the Jewish people. He talks about false messiahs in verse 23. Verse 27 is where he says this. He's talking about when is, this is all going to be happening, and then I'm going to show up. How will you know when I'm going to show up? And what he says here is really interesting. What does verse 27 and 28 mean? For just as lightning comes from the east and flashes as far as the west, so will the coming of the Son of Man be. What does that mean? What's he trying to say? What's the point of this imagery?
Remarkable.
What's that?
Instantaneous.
Okay. And Phil said remarkable. Yeah, like just
Wow.
yeah, I mean, you can't mistake when there's massive lightning flashes in the night sky, right? I mean, there's no mistaking them. You see the lightning and you're like, oh, there's lightning out there. I mean, that's how obvious it will be when the Son of Man comes back. So there's no secret coming. There's no ambiguity. There's no, I wonder if Jesus has come back, or is this what I think it is? It is loud, obvious. It is impossible to miss. What does verse 28 mean? Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. What's that mean?
People die, the vultures are there.
Yeah, he's still talking about how obvious it'll be that he comes back. So what is that? What is this little? It's not a proverb. It's like this cute little saying. What's that have to do with how obvious it'll be when he comes back?
Something like it, an animal could be dead under a bush out in the middle of nowhere. You'd have no idea it was there, but the vultures will recognize it.
Okay. What were you going to say, Aaron? Yeah. Yeah.
Lightning, you can't discount if there's lightning. If it's
Yeah.
same thing, the vultures. I think you talked about this a while ago. When you see vultures up in the air, you're like, oh, there's a dead carcass somewhere.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Like, it's impossible to miss. I know there's a dead body there because I see the vultures. The signs are blinking at me. It's obvious. There's something dead over there. That's why the vultures are circling. Like, that is how obvious it will be when Jesus comes back. So, this chapter's hard because it's not as straightforward. I don't think it's as straightforward as we want it to be. I believe he's talking about two things at once because of the way Luke understands what's happening. So I think he's talking about the destruction of the temple because that's what they asked about, which made him start this conversation. But he's also giving them strong hints about what the end of days is going to be like. So like the mass slaughter and destruction and devastation in 66 to 70 AD is like a movie trailer for the big event and the end of days. And by the end of our little passage that we wrapped up here is I think we've sort of like a Polaroid. I've used that imagery before. When Jesus starts this section, the Polaroid's transitioning from this white film and it's filling in. And by the time we get to the end in verse 27 and 28, I think the Polaroid is fully developed and Jesus is now speaking about when he is going to return to stop this tribulation in its tracks. And that's what he talks about in the next section. Christy, you I think you unmuted yourself, so you were going to ask something.
No, it's okay. I'm good. Thank you, though.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. 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 In verse 29 and following, this is when Jesus returns. I'm not going to cover this today because we only have 3 minutes left. I will say this. From Matthew 24, especially in verses 29 to 31, it looks like Jesus comes back after the tribulation. That's what I'll say. Well, that's what verse 29 says, actually. But it looks like from all the passages we've looked at, from 1 Thessalonians 4 to 1 Corinthians 15 to this, you only see Jesus come back once. So he's only going to, so far from what we've seen, he only comes back once. And he comes back, according to this, at the end of the tribulation of those days. That's when he comes back, and we'll talk about what he does when he comes back and how that fits with other passages next week. But that's where we're left. Now, some people may have strong opinions about this passage. As I said, some people really believe it's just about the destruction of the temple. Other people really believe this is just about the end of days, the Antichrist, and Jesus coming back to put paid to him and dispatch him into hell. I think it's both at the same time, mostly because of the way Luke understands what this says. So I'll wrap up real quick, and then if anyone has questions, they can ask them. I'm always afraid of making end time stuff be this intellectual thing that's not real. Like we just talk about this stuff, but it doesn't have anything to do with your life or anything. So I hope we're not getting that impression. This isn't just some academic thing. If they asked him what will be the signs of the end and what is when are you coming back and what's that going to look like? So if our blessed hope is the glorious appearance of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ, if we are waiting for him to come back, we should want to know what it's going to look like before he comes back so we know when to expect him. We don't have false hope. We have a sober view of what we're supposed to expect while we wait. And if we want to know what we should be looking for, if we want to know what to expect, then 1 Thessalonians 4, 1 Corinthians 15, especially Matthew 24, because this is Jesus himself in his own words. He tells us here what this looks like. He tells us about an escalating on-ramp of destruction and persecution and betrayal and hardships. He tells us about a time of great unrest and tribulation in persecution. Not to everybody. People who belong to the Antichrist, they're going to be having the time of their lives. They won't care. They're going to be happy. We seem to think that everyone on earth will be miserable. But when the Antichrist is ruling, the people who are with him, they're going to be happy. If you look at Revelation 18, the world is upset when Babylon, Satan's kingdom, is destroyed. They're weeping. They're sad because everything they are and were is bound up with these worldly hopes and dreams. And when that's ripped away from them right before Jesus comes back, it's like their lives are over. Everything they are and were, everything that makes them who they are is gone. And their lives are over. They are happy during this time. It's the believers who are being persecuted and who experience persecution and unrest. And it's believers for whose sake the Lord puts a stop to what's going on so that there are people left when he comes back. So this is not some academic thing. It's important for us to have a real idea of what we're supposed to expect in this world until Jesus comes back. But we'll wrap that part up next week. Read verses 29 to 31 and 29 through the end of the chapter and think about what they mean. It's really, really good stuff. And this is the real crux of it right there. But we'll cover it next week. Does anyone have questions or anything they want to ask or anything I can cover next week if it takes too long?
What are we going to do after Matthew 24? What's the next one?
Probably we're going to do Revelation 16 to Revelation 22. So that's what we're going. I don't think there's another passage. I may go into Matthew 25 because there's a few parables he tells to get the point across from Matthew 24. So I may just do 25. But once we're done with Matthew 24, 25, we're going to do Revelation 16 to the end. All in
Revelation
one.
is such a good one.
Yeah, it is. It is. No one has any questions, comments, thoughts?
Okay, I just have a quick one.
Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
Okay, so at the end, I'm not arguing with what you said at all. I'm just saying in verse 21 at the end, it says, since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. So how could it be both events, I guess? Because it says, nor ever shall be. So what is, I guess, will you help me with that one a little bit?
Yeah, I think that verse 21 is basically the hinge point where he swings over to mostly talking about the end times. Because there is going to be a great tribulation, and it is going to be the worst thing ever. What happened to the Jewish people in 70 AD was really, really, really bad. I had a whole bunch of quotes from Josephus I was going to show you, but I don't have time. It was really bad. There's a lot of scholars who say it was one of the worst calamities to befall people in human history. So it was very awful, but the Great Tribulation is going to be worse. So if you take what Luke said and how Luke understood this, what was happening, he seems to think that it's the Roman armies because they're the only people who destroyed Jerusalem. So that's what makes me think there's two things at once. And like a Polaroid, I think by the time you hit verse 21, the Polaroid has developed enough that we're basically talking pretty much strictly about the end times with the Antichrist by the time we hit verse 21. If that makes sense.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know
Yeah.
if people are really gonna be happy during that time, because God's gonna run out a bunch of curses and things on people. And there's gonna be the bugs that bite them, that they suffer from.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, we'll get into all that. Well, except for the satanic bugs, people will be happy. I mean,
And they know that God's there, but they curse him.
okay, well, maybe that was a slight oversight on my part. But anyway, so we will talk about all of that. Thanks a lot, Tim. I think that's a slight fly in the ointment, no pun intended, on my on that
No,
week.
there's just plain gonna be a lot of wrath poured out from God while the Antichrist.
To your point, and a lot, those people think they're happy. You know,
Well,
look at a drug addict. He thinks, oh, I'm getting fixed, I'm happy, but he's really miserable. You know, that kind of.
well, they're happy in that when the two witnesses get killed, they go around and have big parties and take presents to each other.
Yeah, they do.
because the two witnesses. So I'm not gonna say he's totally wrong. I'm just saying that they're also gonna have things happen that they're not gonna be happy with.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's fair enough. I think you're definitely onto something. Revelation's one of those books that I need to have all my notes in front of me, or it's a hard book. Anyway, but that's in the future. So I'll pray, and then everyone can have a great evening.